Welcome to Business Chronicles by Rogers Capital Tax. I am Pallavi Agnihotri.
And I'm Robbie Tarani.
Today's episode shall consist of 4 parts. The first part shall be about the important tax filing deadlines for the month of December 2023.
The second part of our show shall be a discussion with the Managing Director of Rogers Capital Tax, Ryan Dennis Alas, about a recent ARC judgment, Alteo Energy and the MRA.
Followed by an intervention by the Head of Tax Investigation of Rogers Capital Tax, Mrs. Nema Sukan Mitu, on the tax area settlement scheme.
To close our show, we have an immense pleasure of welcoming Pierre Dinant, economist, for an in-depth interview.
We shall now highlight the important tax filing deadlines so that our viewers stay on top of these deadlines and to ensure compliance with the tax authorities and to avoid any unnecessary penalties.
By Wednesday, 27th of December 2023, a monthly return of tax deduction at source for November 2023 must be filed.
APS statement and payment of tax by companies for quarter ending 30 September 2023.
Submission of return and payment of tax by companies with accounting year ending in June 2023.
Submission of VAT return for the month of November 2023 and payment of tax if any.
Submission of CPS statement and payment of tax for quarter ending 30th of September 2023 by individuals.
Submission of the tax area settlement scheme by 3rd January 2024.
We must also highlight that where a company's accounting period ends in June 2023, the return should be submitted by
17th of January 2024 when no tax is payable or a loss is declared.
31st of January 2024, for companies having submitted a 4th APS.
Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Robbie and Pallavi.
Ryan, there has been a lot of interesting decisions delivered by the ARC recently, but the one that particularly interests us the most is Alteo Energy and the MRA. Could you tell us a bit more about the facts?
In fact, Alteo Energy is a company whose main business is not money lending. But during the course of the years, it has derived interest income. And it has claimed partial exemption of 80% on the interest income. That is, it has claimed that 80% of its income is exempt from tax as per the provision of the Income Tax Act.
Ryan, what was the contention of the MRA in the Alteo Energy Limited case?
According to the MRA, the partial exemption of 80% on interest income is available only to companies whose main activity is money lending. That is, the interest income is derived from the core income generating activity of the company. And the MRA considered that Alteo Energy main income generating activity is not deriving interest.
Ryan, what was the stand of the applicant?
The stand of the applicant was that as long as a company has its core income generating activities in Mauritius, it is eligible to claim the 80% partial exemption.
Ryan, what was the decision of the Assessment Review Committee?
The Assessment Review Committee, in this case, ruled in favor of the MRA. That is, according to the Assessment Review Committee, a company must derive interest as part of its core income generating activity. That is, interest must account for a significant proportion of its turnover, or it must be engaged in money lending activities. Otherwise, it is not eligible to claim the 80% partial exemption. And fortunately, however, the applicant, Alteo Energy Limited, has appealed against the decision of the ARC to the Supreme Court. And hopefully, by next year, we'll get a final decision on whether a company can claim partial exemption on interest income if it does not form part of its core income generating activity.
So, Ryan, what are the implications for domestic companies as well as GBLs?
For domestic companies, the consequences are minimal because In the past, prior to 2019, all companies, domestic companies in Mauritius, were paying tax on interest income at 15%. From 2019, with the introduction of the partial exemption regime, they started to pay tax at maximum rate of 3% on interest income. But now, it will be after the judgment of the ARC and pending the decision of the Supreme Court, they would be paying tax on interest income at 15% again. So there has been only change for a few years, but it will be back to normal, let's say. But for global business companies, before 2019, that is before the introduction of the partial exemption regime, they were always paying tax at 3% on interest income because of the presumed foreign tax credit regime. And with the abolition of the presumed foreign tax credit regime and the partial exemption regime, now a global business company will have to consider first whether its core income generating activity is interest income, then they can claim partial exemption. Otherwise, they will be paying tax at 15%. So this will be a big change for global business companies, as interest income were previously always taxed at 3%, now it will be 15%.
So, Ryan, what stand should taxpayers take pending the decision of the Supreme Court?
Very good question, Valerie. In fact, taxpayers has, let's say, three options. The first option, which is a less risky option, would be to, until the decision of the Supreme Court, they pay tax on interest at the rate of 15%. They do not claim the partial exemption. This is the safest option. The second option would be to, they claim the partial exemption and wait. If the MRA raise an assessment, they may be subject to interest and penalties, which may be confirmed by the decision of the Supreme Court or not. The risk is that if the decision of the Supreme Court is in favor of the MRA gain, then they would be subject to interest and penalties. The third option would be they can claim the partial exemption and express a doubt on the tax return. Then, even if the MRA raise an assessment because they have claimed partial exemption, there will be no interest and penalties. Then, upon the decision of the Supreme Court, they would know whether they would have to pay the tax or not.
Thank you, Ryan. Very interesting case indeed. We shall await the judgment of the Supreme Court.
Thank you.
We shall now move on to the next part of our show.
The Tax Area Settlement Scheme, which we all know as TAS, has been launched by the MRA in the year 2020. This scheme has been renewed under the Finance Act 2023 to help taxpayers which are having difficulties paying the tax amount in full. Under this scheme, the taxpayer will benefit from a 100% waiver of penalties and interest. Of course, to benefit from this scheme, there are some conditions applicable. The tax arrears should be outstanding as of the 2nd of June 2023. Taxpayers having assessment pending before the Assessment Review Committee, Supreme Court, or the Privy Council should withdraw the appeal before this institution. Taxpayers should also make an application to the DG of the MRA before the 3rd of January 2024. The taxpayer benefiting from this scheme should ensure to settle the pure tax amount on or before the 1st of April 2024. So there are two important dates to remember. Firstly, the 3rd of January 2024, by when the application should be made, and secondly, 1st of April 2024, by when the pure tax amount should be paid to the MRA. The MRA has also come up with an e-application platform on the MRA website to avoid the hassle of filing the paper application form to join TAS, which I find quite user-friendly. The taxpayer should fill in the required form and submit the tax application. Lastly, it is to be noted that this scheme is not applicable to a person who has been convicted of an offence, a person against whom there are any pending or contemplated civil or criminal proceedings, or a person who is subject to an inquiry relating to drug trafficking. If ever you have any queries regarding TAS, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
So welcome, Mr. Dinan. It's an immense pleasure having you here on this platform.
So, Mr. Dinan, in examining the current economic landscape of Mauritius, could you provide an in-depth analysis of the general state of economic growth of Mauritius?
That's a big question. Let us say, if there is one word which comes to my mind in response to what you've just asked me, our economy is recovering from COVID. That doesn't mean that all is correct, but we are recovering at least the good news. For instance, at the time of COVID, let us take the year 2021, our gross domestic product, which I like to call the national cake, which we produce every year. Our GDP, gross national product, was equal to 479 billion rupees. Now, in this particular calendar year, which is coming to an end, it's not 479, it's 647 billion. So there is progress. However, I wish to draw the attention to one thing. When I said 479 billion rupees, that was the rupees of 2021. Now when I say 647 billion, that's the rupees of 2023. And I need not recall that it's not the same rupee. So while on the face of it, there is growth, no doubt about it. There is growth, and I will tell you what growth. We have to be very careful. We unfortunately we don't have constant rupees. We have current rupees. But you see, we should have constant rupees to know exactly what is the progress. So we have to bear this in mind. But that being said, yes, there is some progress, and in actual fact, when you look at the growth rate, that growth rate had gone down considerably because of COVID. In 2020, we even had a negative growth, and our national cake went down by 14.3%, went down. Now, when in 2021, the cake grew a little bit bigger at the rate of, and it was 3.4% times higher. And now, in 2023, we are expecting a growth rate of 6.6. So this is good news, but that does not mean that we just sit down here. And I wish to really put the emphasis on the fact that we are not comparing constant rupees, we are comparing current rupees. So we have to bear this in mind.
So, Mr. Dinan, since we've been talking about economic growth, what, according to you, are the primary drivers behind this current growth trajectory?
The primary drivers, you said. Yes, I think you are right, it's drivers. And to my mind, these two drivers are tourism and I think I know you will like that, financial sector. Now, tourism is starting again, fortunately. We are happy to see more and more tourists coming into our country. And on the other side, on the financial industry, we are seeing, therefore, a recovery of monies going through our system, or either coming through our system going elsewhere, or money is coming into our system here. So these seem to be the primary drivers, although, if I may be allowed, I think I would like to point out what I feel is a weak link is our port activities. I don't think we are really putting into effect the benefits we can draw from our port activities. And on the debit side, if I may be allowed, sector requiring a lot of attention is agriculture, both land and sea. On the land side, I am sometimes very sorry to see so much of our agricultural lands being built upon. And on the maritime side, what are we really doing with all that area which is placed at our disposal by the United Nations, and we continue importing considerable amount of fish, maritime products. These are weak links where I think we have really to work and find to what extent, how we can better use these resources for the betterment, for the growth of our economy.
Mr. Dinan, you mentioned about the tourism sector, and obviously it plays a pivotal role in our economy. So what strategies are being implemented to enhance its competitive standing in the global market?
May I, before answering your question, recall that tourism was launched in Mauritius in the 70s, 80s. It all started, I understand, with Amédée Bengal, much earlier than that, because the demand for jobs was much larger than the supply. So tourism is an industry which is labor intensive. And unfortunately now we are lacking labor. So that's a problem. So how does tourism, and I come to your question, tourism now, how does it adapt to the new situation? I really don't know, but I would, as I see it, whenever I go into a hotel or a restaurant and I start speaking French or Creole, it doesn't understand. It should be Malagasy or some other language from our neighbors. So there is a difficulty there, it seems to me, because the tourist who comes here, he wants to see the Mauritian smile. He wants to enjoy Mauritius, because if he wants to go to enjoy from some other country, he goes to that other country. So there is a problem. How does a labor-intensive industry adapt itself to a situation where labor is becoming scarce? That having been said, you did ask me how is the industry adapting. I am not in the hotel industry myself, so I can only tell you what I would like to see. And we have, you see, we always have to try to differentiate ourselves. How does the Mauritian tourist industry, how can it differentiate itself from the tourist industry of Seychelles, for instance? And we have a point there. When you go to Seychelles, it seems to me, it's mainly a sort of Creole setting. When you come to Mauritius, you have a setting made up of the Creole side, the Indian side, the Chinese side, the European side. We have a lot of cultural background to share with our visitors. And this seems to me to be a plus for us. And this is where I regret very much. At our museums, some are closed. Port Louis Museum, Rosil Museum, closed. We have opportunities to show to the tourists who come here our background of our ancestors who have come from Europe, Asia, Africa.
Yeah, in other words, our roots, which is very important.
Our roots, exactly. So this is a plus which we have, and I don't think we are using it. And this is where I would like to refer to the Sega dancers. I have come to realize when I go and spend 1 or 2 days in a hotel, the evening you always have a Sega dancers. But this is part of one culture of Mauritius which you are seeing. And you could have, and this is important. And of course, during the day, you can visit the religious areas, whether it is Christian or Hindu or Muslim. So there are opportunities for us to show to what extent we are different. And very much in business, differentiation is important. And I am not sure we are really doing this properly. So let's continue, let's build up on it, let's give to tourism that sort of subgroup, which I would call the cultural activities, cultural, religious, or whatever, and to make us different, and of course to attract not only Europeans but also Africans and also Asians. There are 2 further points I would like to make concerning the future of tourism here, especially its progress. We have to be a peaceful country. A tourist doesn't go to a place where things are not going too well. The second point is an economic point. We hear very much statistics being given to us, so many tourists, so more tourists are coming. That's not the main statistic which should be given. We should be given tourists are spending so much per day in Mauritius. The more we spend, the more we get from that industry and the more we get in terms of foreign exchange. I am afraid that sometimes if I spend an evening, a night in a hotel, next morning after breakfast, I see so many tourists just lying by the sea, and I am afraid it looks as if they are going to spend the whole day there. They have already paid their money. We want them to spend more. And we want them to travel in the country, to go and see the museums, for instance, or as I was saying, to see the various cultures. So we should be working on that score. What about beautiful gardens in our towns? What about footpaths where we don't risk to fall? So there are things like that where we must really be welcoming with a view. I am not saying we must always be commercial, but at least we should be trying to get them to spend a bit more money when we go abroad. We do try and get more money out of us as tourists. So what are we doing? This is an important thing. It's not just getting them to go from the airport to the hotel. No, we want them to get out of the hotel and go and spend some money and see, of course, and see things which are worth seeing, as I was saying, the cultural side of things, amongst others, or the beauty of our nature. So not just sit by the sea, of course, that's a good, but by the way, talking of the sea, we have also an ecological problem. So we have to be very careful to ensure that we protect all these coastal areas of Mauritius. This is one of the things we have to master. So that's it.
So, Mr. Dinan, as with any robust economy, Mauritius undoubtedly faces its share of challenges. In your expert opinion, what are the major economic challenges confronting Mauritius?
Our major economic challenge is to make a better use of our resources, both human and natural. On the human side, we have a demographic problem. It's we need more births. Why do I say that? Because for the past 30 years or so, this has gone down. Okay, fair enough. But at the same time, because of the progress of medicine, we have also an increase in old age people. In other words, now, when you look at the normal demographic tree, the base, the young people, is large, and you go down, and then the top is rather narrow. Now it's not that. Now we are having, I am afraid we are having that. So the resources are getting old, they are no longer resources, they expect to be looked after, and that's all. But then you have to use the resources down there. So we really need a rebalancing of our demographics, but you can't do that in a day. But I think there must be a campaign to explain to one and all what is the situation. And of course, not to come and say, as they are doing in France now, they are protesting in France because the government there is saying pension age must be further away, and they are protesting. Fortunately, this has not yet reached us here, but I am afraid that generally speaking, when you reach the age of about 65 or even less, you say, oh well, now I can sit down at home and I do nothing. But you are still in good shape. So there must be some realization amongst the older people that there are things which they can still do, and they must be helped alongside. And by the way, with all these modern tools, communication tools we have today, I think there should be from the part of the government, of the municipalities, tuition to the older people so that they can manage themselves and enjoy themselves, by the way. So that's the demographic side of it. Amongst the other challenges, I would say perhaps the main one is what are we doing? And I think I mentioned that earlier. What are we doing with our blue economy? What are we doing? We are relying so much on imports while we should enhance our own capacity. We should both from the point of view of helping people, teaching them how to fish, but also giving them the equipment, the modern equipment. This is a job to be done. Similarly, agriculture also must be modernized. Gone are the days when you would have the old grandpapa working in the fields. No, that's finished. We need people fully trained and with the proper equipment. And finally, we must stop converting agricultural land into buildings. We need, I am not saying that all land should be agricultural, far from it, but some of the agricultural land which is now gone, which was under sugar and under sugarcane, I would like to see two things. Plant a sugarcane which will be particularly useful not for sugar, but for providing us fuel, or vegetables plus élevage. So there is some rethinking, very serious rethinking to be done about these economic challenges, and make sure that we can carry on. We have modern agriculture, it seems to my mind to be a very important thing, plus blue economy, plus of course ourselves, the human resources. We must ensure that we adapt to this, what I would say we are living in a revolution of the technological world. We have to adapt, and the older we are, the more difficult it is. So there is work to be done here. Amongst all, at school, of course, that should be perhaps the easier one and the most important one, but also across the ages, until the older people get used to this new technological environment.
How significant is international trade for Mauritius in terms of emerging export markets for Mauritian products and services?
Very, very significant. Imports and exports, add them together, they are, in this particular year, they are larger than gross domestic product by 15.2%. GDP is expected to be 647 billion, imports 305, exports 360, both taken together, that comes you to 745 compared to 646. In percentage, imports plus exports is 15.2% larger than GDP. An extremely open economy. Over and above, exports at 360 billion is lower than imports at 385 billion. What does that mean? Our stock of foreign currency, euro, sterling, dollars, goes down. So don't be surprised when you talk to businessmen and they tell you, I am having problems when I want some foreign currency to import for my industry. The bank says, we haven't got enough. So this is a very serious matter. And the short answer to all that is, we must increase exports, but more importantly, we must reduce imports. And reduce imports means develop our resources. That's it. So it's clear what we have to do, except that we are not doing it properly. Having pointed out that we are a very open economy, but with imports much larger than exports, what solution can we envisage? One, and I think I mentioned that earlier, use our resources, but namely in the agricultural or maritime fields. But there is also more to that. We can increase the exports, if I may say so, of our brains. We have an excellent opportunity with the financial sector, where we are already doing, and when I say the financial sector, I am referring to the cross-border financial sector, where our clients are foreign people with a lot of money, by the way, and we offer to them our expert services. So this is extremely important, and we must carry on that, in that field, and also bear in mind that we are the star and key of the Indian Ocean. We should make this become a reality and ensure that we live up to that name, and that through our financial services we provide to foreign capitalists, whether from Europe or from the United States, a possibility to go into African countries. And by the way, we are the link. Of course, we get our money for the services we give to them. So there are opportunities in the cross-border financial sector for Mauritius, and that will be, in economic terms, an export. So we should, to my mind, do this, plus, of course, as I have told you, about reducing our imports by developing better our natural resources, especially the land and sea, and particularly the sea resources.
Mr. Dinan, can you share with our viewers your prognostications for the future of the Mauritian economy?
That's a big question. Well, perhaps I'll start with demographics. I have already mentioned that, so I won't stay long on this question. But we must really try to see how we can make our population younger. Now, another point is, let's have better technical education at school. For instance, we need computer engineers. We don't just want those who know how to use this machine. No, we want them to be able to really to learn how it all works, be computer engineers, and master informatics. This seems to me, and of course, given the present stage, also master artificial intelligence. So all these are jobs, to my mind, jobs for the future. Another thing which we have and which we should preserve, our two international languages. I think this is extremely important. It opens up to us the whole world. Very useful. And of course, linked to that, our multifaceted cultural background. And this will be particularly of interest, I think I mentioned that earlier, to the tourists. It gives us a unique advantage. In the same vein, what are our EPZ manufactured products? It's rather difficult, I would suggest, I would suspect, but people who are in the EPZ industry would be better telling us about it than I. We are in competition on the international markets with manufactured products of the type we do, made in countries with lower costs. Because our economy has progressed, our labor costs are higher. It's a fact. So how do we compete with countries like for instance, Madagascar or some perhaps of the Asian countries? How do we compete with them? Let our product be recognized as particularly Mauritian. And it's good to know that there is at present an organization in the private sector which is looking after making products which are truly Mauritian, as far as I know. So work must be done in that sector so that we produce products, manufactured products, jeans or whatever, but with a Mauritian touch, so that we can, when we go to the large shops in London or in Paris, we recognize, oh, this is Mauritian, and we are ready to pay a different price because this is with a particular reference. So that seems to me to be an importance. Also, about from this Mauritian touch, we must, and I think I said that earlier, we are a step onto the African countries. Let's be clear, our economy is much more developed than most African countries. So, but they need investments. We have financial services which we have developed. So let our services be used and earn money, of course. This is a way of export. This is an export of services. And that means, it seems to me, that our foreign services of a country should be really adapted so that in all these embassies which we have over the world, there are people there who are really helping industry here to export into those particular countries. Now, we must also realize that we are an island in the middle of the ocean. There is a large piece of land over there, and it is called Madagascar. And it is highly undeveloped. It's a huge country. I dream sometimes, but I know it's a dream. It can be more than a dream at the present moment. Why don't we join hands? But of course, there we are going into the political world, and we must, and do the Malgache want us all together? This is another matter. But if this could be, if there was that will in Madagascar and in Mauritius and in Seychelles, for instance, to work together, we, Mauritius, we could provide to them the knowledge we have acquired so far in various fields. They could provide to us the products of their huge land territory, agriculture particularly. And this would strengthen these islands which are just there. So I am not criticizing our links with India or China. These are huge economies compared to us. And of course, we have also our people who come from, whose ancestors came from there, all very nice. But yes, have links with them, but we must look also at the links. I think I have said before with African countries, but also with our neighbors. And Madagascar is the large one there, which we should be able, for their benefit and for our benefit, to work together and develop our joint economies, each one with its own requirements. So this is the point. And perhaps finally, we have to take our destiny in our own hands. And if I may be allowed to quote somebody who, in my younger years, I admired, and that's John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And he said, on the day I think he became president, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. It is true, still true today for us in Mauritius. Because in Mauritius here, we are very much attracted by short-termism. what's in it for me? The future, I could not care less. What's in it for me? Short-termism. This is wrong. This is wrong. You can't get everything. You have to do your own homework. You have to make your own efforts. So we must sort of change our attitude and think about actions which are with a long-term benefit. You see, we owe it to our children and our grandchildren.
Well, thank you, Mr. Piedina. It was an absolute pleasure having you on this platform.
Thank you. So it was for me.
We have now come to an end of this episode. See you in the next one.